friends. I want to do our Bible lesson today, and we're going to talk about King David, and I want to talk about the Ark of the Covenant. So I want you to remember back with Moses, right? And God had told Moses to build a tabernacle, right? It was like a big tent that they could move along when they were moving in the desert, right? And there was a courtyard. They would have like a fence around it, right? And there was a courtyard, and it would have the wash basin where they could clean. It would have the altar where they did the sacrifices, right at the horns of the altar there. This is where they would do the sacrifices. Inside, it was divided into two parts, right? And so in here was the table for the bread. They had the candlestick was in here, where they would be the light of God. That was in here. And then in the back, remember, so this was called the holy place here. Remember that? And in the back, we had the Holy of Holies. Holy of Holies, or the most holy place. This was a really special place that some people could come in here, but mainly the priests. But in here, only the priests, only certain times could go in here. And in the Holy of Holies, the most holy place, that only a priest went in there, I believe, just once a year. But in here do you remember what they kept in here? The Ark of the Covenant, right? And the Ark of the Covenant was basically a box, but they had it on poles for when the priest had to move it. It had some angel seraphim and up on the top. I'm not very good at drawing that, but you get the idea. Angels that were up at the top with their wings. And inside here is where they kept Aaron's staff that had, and then there was the 10 Commandments were in here, and a jar of manna for when they remembered God giving them manna in the desert time. So, but the Ark of the Covenant, we'll just call it the Ark for now. The Ark of the Covenant was a symbol of God's presence with them. Okay, it was really special. And when they had to move it, the priests had to do it by poles. There was a lot of special rules because it was like showing respect for God. Okay, and remember when Eli's sons, Hophni and Phinehas, remember when they were fighting with the Philistines, and they said, hey, let's take the ark to the battlefield because then we'll know God's with us. But they forgot to ask God if he really wanted them to do that. And then the ark got captured. Remember that story? We'll do a quick review. The ark got captured by the Philistines, and the Philistines put it in their temple of their god Dagon, right, their idol, and Dagon fell down before the ark, and they put him back up, and the next day he fell down, and his hands and his head had broken off, and then they said, we got to get this ark out of here. So they moved it from town to town, and in each town, the people of the Philistines would get sick in the different towns, and finally they said, let's get this ark out of here, right? Their God is mad at us. We do not want him mad at us. So they put it on the cart with the two mama cows, and they put their babies on one side, and Israel was over here. And they said, well, the mama cows would want to go to their babies, but if it's really God talking, they'll have it go back to Israel. And of course, it really went back to Israel because it was God's presence with them. So it went back to Israel. Israelites were excited. It stopped the first town it stopped in, and they had a big party. But then the ark stayed there. King Saul never moved it anywhere else. He just left it there. So David, now when David came, he was in Jerusalem. When he was king, he made his palace in Jerusalem, and he built this big palace, and he was happy there. He did have to fight the Philistines. David was a warrior king. So his job from God was to claim the land of Canaan, the promised land, back for Israel, because the Philistines were still living there, some Canaanites were still living there, and some other people. So his job was to help reclaim the promised land for Israel. So he did a lot of battles, and there's a couple times that he fought the Philistines, but he always asked God, what should I do? And that's what we should do all the time, right? Ask God for guidance of what he wants. Now, there's even one time, it's really cool, that God said, yes, go and fight them. When you hear the sound of marching in the trees, you'll know that I'm going with you into battle. So God's angel army was going into battle before them, and you could hear the sound of marching in the trees. Wouldn't that be cool to hear? That's amazing, right? So God was with David during those battles, and he fought for them. And David, though, one day he was in his palace, and he looked out and he saw, he was thinking about God's tabernacle, and he saw, oh, what am I doing? I have this beautiful palace that I'm living in, and God's still living in a tent. God's house is still a tent. Now, God didn't really live there, right? God is everywhere, but that was showing God's presence. So he said, I can't be living in this great palace when God just has a tent. I have to make something wonderful for God, which David's heart was in the right place, right? He wanted to give a good thing to God. So he called the prophet Nathan, and he said, hey, Nathan, I want to build God a beautiful palace too, a beautiful temple, instead of this tabernacle that's a tent. And we can move everything into that and make it beautiful and have it great for God. And Nathan's like, yeah, that's a great idea. And so David was going to start doing that. But then God said to Nathan, actually, Nathan, no, I don't need that from David. And so Nathan went back to David, and he said, actually, God said no. He doesn't need you to build him a beautiful palace or a beautiful temple. He said, God wants you. Your job is to be the warrior king. Your job is to reclaim the land for Israel, and you have a lot of fighting and things that you've done. And God wants his temple, his beautiful house, to be built by a king of peace, not a king who's done a lot of fighting. So he said, your son, David, your son, he can build. Give him a time of peace, and he can build a beautiful temple. So we'll talk about that story more next week. But he said, David, that's not going to be for you to do, okay? So David said, okay, if that's what God wants, I'll follow what God wants, right? So David did not build a beautiful temple, but his son is going to. But God made him a promise. He said, your kingdom will last forever. I will bless you. God loved where David's heart was. Remember, that's one of the things God loved about David at the beginning. He called him a man after God's own heart because he had a heart for God. He wanted to honor God and please God and do things for God. And God loved that. That was a great servant heart that he had. One other thing I wanted to tell you, remember David and Jonathan, remember they were best friends. Jonathan was Saul's son, and they had promised when they had to leave each other, they had promised to always take care of each other's families. When David became king, he said, hey, is there anybody in Saul's family or Jonathan's family that is still alive? Because a lot of them had died in battles and things. And they said, well, Jonathan has a son. His name is Mephibosheth, and he's actually lame. He got dropped when he was little, and both of his feet don't work right. He can't walk real well. But he's living in another city, and he's the only one left in Jonathan's family. So David called for Mephibosheth, and he said, come and live in the palace with me, eat at my table. He treated him like his own son. He said, because I promised your dad, he was my very best friend, and I promised your dad that I would take care of his family if something happened to him. So David kept his promise to Jonathan, which is pretty cool to keep your promises, right? So we're going to talk more in the next story about David. All right. So I also want to know it's chapel day today, and we can't have chapel together, but I did want to tell you that there are on that website that your mom and dad got for this video, there is on the bottom, there's a link that says favorite chapel songs, and I put a lot of our favorite songs on there so you can sing and listen to those songs, watch the videos, and have fun doing that, okay? All right. Wait, I almost forgot. I have another cool puzzle page for you. All right, so this time it says King David, and it has some different symbols down here, and you have to figure out what the symbols stand for. So some of them look kind of similar, so you have to be careful. So the starfish, there's a starfish there. Oh, that's a D, so you're going to write a D in there. The shoe, you're going to look, where is the shoe? Oh, it's an A, so you're going to write an A there. All right, so keep looking and see if you can fill in the code and figure out and then read these sentences. Okay, have fun.